right, everyone. Since everyone's here, we can go ahead and get started. Is everyone okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'd like to call to order the budget workshop meeting for June 22nd, 2020. Can we please have roll call?
Commissioner Drosky,
Here.
Commissioner Hudak,
Here.
Commissioner Preston,
Here.
Vice Mayor Parnas,
Here.
Mayor Gantz.
Here. Vice Mayor, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Can we have approval of the agenda for tonight?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Preston, second by Vice Mayor Parnas. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Commission, staff, and the public who may be listening. Over the next 3 days, we will be presenting many of the proposed items within the fiscal year 21 budget. This budget for fiscal year 21 directly represents the impacts that COVID-19 has had on our economy. The same impacts that we are feeling in this fiscal year. It will take some time before we see a sense of normalcy after COVID-19. It will take community immunity ultimately to rid us of this virus. And the only two ways in which that can happen is through infection or vaccination. Reports tell us that we should see a vaccination sometime in the next 6 months or so. But until that certainty, we are in a position of uncertainty. In fiscal year 20, we were able to responsibly reduce the millage rate, as well as the city's overall expenditures in the general fund by $1 million. In this coming year, we expect to see a reduction from that upwards of 5%. This represents a larger decrease in the general fund revenue than during any period during the Great Recession. This will be no small undertaking. This will require decisions. The budgets being presented to you today are a little bit different than how we presented them last year. Last year, in a time of certainty and economic prevalence, we had a very good understanding of what we were going to be able to do and how we were going to be able to do it. And so the budgets presented to you represented approximately 97% of a completed proposed budget that I would present to you. That is not the case this year. This year, each department will be presenting to you their budgets as they are today, along with some very difficult decisions that we will need to make in order to further reduce what we have today. As it stands today, we still have approximately $5 million to cut from this budget in order to balance it. Later on tonight, you will get a revenue forecast from the Chief Financial Officer to tell you exactly what we expect to bring in at this given time. This year's budget that we are presenting, or next year's budget that we are presenting, includes very little capital investment. It does not contain much future planning expenses or operational enhancements. What it does contain is a contingency budget slide, which will present to you various things that I have worked and the two assistant city managers have worked with each department to identify other cost-saving measures that we will need to imply in order to balance this budget. City staff and the directors have worked very hard to get to where we are today. We started with a general fund budget expenditure of $115 million. But we have to get to around, at this point in time, $102.8 million in the general fund expenditure budget. As I said, we're about $5 million off today. And just as we did last year, we shave every nickel and dime that we can in order to balance this budget, and I'm very confident we will get there. But we are at a point now where there are going to be some decisions to be made and some recommendations that will be made to you. And we look forward to your feedback to assist us in making these tough decisions. I'd like to take the time to thank Mr. Tom Good, Assistant City Manager, Angela Adediran, Assistant City Manager, Stephanie Tinsley, our Chief Financial Officer, Allison Tesla, our Budget Manager, and Gilbert Hernandez, our Budget Analyst, who have worked very hard to get us where we are today. Along with Tri-Merge Consulting, who, as you know, has been with us for quite some time, assisting us in the Department of Finance on all of our needs. This evening, we'll be going through day one of the 3 days. We will have an update on the budget process from Allison. Stephanie Tinsley will give you the revenue forecast. Angela will go over some of the major FY21 budget initiatives and changes. And then we'll go in through the various departments today, which would be financial services, information technology services, human resources, public affairs and marketing, the city clerk, and then we will conclude with public input. As we go through these, unlike what we've had in the past with the in-person meetings, each director will present. I will be unmuted at the same time to fill in and assist where needed. And of course, at any time, if you have any questions during the presentations or after, please don't hesitate to ask. We look forward to working with you through the budget process from now until the remainder of the second reading in September. The revenues that we will be showing you tonight are preliminary numbers at this point in time. The ad valorem tax estimates that we have will be revised here in the next week or so, as well as many of the other ones that we receive from the state. But as of right now, we believe the most accurate representation of what the general fund revenues that will come in for next fiscal year are approximately $102.8 million. With that, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Allison to do the Budget 101 process. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Allison Teslia, and I'm the Budget Manager. Today, I'll be giving an overview of the budget process so you can have a better understanding of why we budget the way we do and some of the requirements we must follow. Next slide, please. The budget is a blueprint for the upcoming fiscal year. Our budget provides specific pertinent information to its readers per the Government Finance Officers Association's best practices. The budget document is broken down into these major sections, which not only provide revenue and expenditure data, but also give an overview of the city's financial health, strategic priorities, staffing level information, and management's goals for the year. In the transmittal letter section, the reader will gain an understanding of the city manager's vision, the critical issues facing the city, the recommended policies and procedural changes, as well as milestones that were reached during the current fiscal year. The introductory section provides a brief history of the city, an overview of its customers, its principal products and services, as well as its mission statement and philosophy. This section also includes a description of the budget process, the budget calendar, as well as miscellaneous statistical information. Similar to an individual with more than one checking account, a municipality categorizes revenues and expenditures into separate funds according to their specific purposes. In the budgetary data by fund section, each department and division within the fund is identified, schedules of detailed revenue sources and expenditures are provided, and the goals and objectives, as well as the performance measures for each department, are outlined. The debt administration section provides an overview of the city's debt policy. It gives a description of each outstanding bond issue, as well as the city's existing debt service requirements, including future minimum lease payments. This section also presents the calculation of the city's legally authorized debt limit and margin. The capital improvement summary provides a comprehensive listing and explanation of the capital needs of the city for the next 5 years and the impact of capital improvements on the operating budget. Lastly, the glossary provides the reader with a listing of terms and acronyms that are frequently utilized in the budget. Next slide, please. Per Florida state statutes, municipalities must adopt a balanced budget. A balanced budget is balanced when all sources of funds equal all uses of funds. Next slide, please. The total sources of funds include any funds left over from the prior year and new revenues expected to come in during the fiscal year. Per state statutes, ad valorem revenues are projected at 95% of the revenue estimates. Contracts and grants are typically budgeted at 100%, and the cash carryover from the prior year is also budgeted at 100%. Certain revenues can only be used for specific purposes. For example, gas taxes can only be used for transportation purposes. Fire assessment fees can only be used for fire safety, and stormwater fees can only be used for stormwater related expenditures. Due to some of the restrictions given on these revenues, most cities elect to create special funds to account for those related revenues and expenses. Here we use special funds to account for our water and sewer, stormwater, solid waste, building, and insurance and risk-related revenues and expenditures. By pulling these specific costs from the general fund and establishing a dedicated revenue source to pay for these services, it frees up dollars in the general fund for other uses. The total use of funds include operating expenses. Oh, next slide, please. I'm sorry. Total use of funds includes operating expenses. Oh, back one. There we go. Includes operating expenses such as personnel and expenditures used in regular operations, capital improvements, interfund transfers, and any reserves. Next slide, please. Based on Florida statutes, the city is required to adopt a budget each year and is bound to follow specific guidelines in order to meet TRIM compliance. We are given specific dates to complete tasks and forms to file with supporting documentation in order to prove that we are following those requirements, which are regulated by the Florida Department of Revenue. Next slide, please. The property tax rate is referred to as a millage, which is the amount that property owners pay for every $1,000 of taxable value. Here's a breakdown of how a typical homesteaded property owner's tax dollars would be allocated here in the city. As you can see, the city of Deerfield Beach only receives a portion of a homeowner's property taxes paid. Next slide, please. The city's fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th, but the budget cycle never really ends. As soon as a new fiscal year begins, we start planning for the next year's budget. Typically in late fall, we review the strategic goals and come up with a set of parameters for the upcoming budget year. These parameters may include anything from anticipated changes in expenditures, staffing levels, tax rates, or regulatory requirements. In January, the Budget Office holds budget training for the departments to provide guidelines for the upcoming year. After budget training, the city manager and the budget staff start meeting with departments to discuss various topics such as their performance measures, staffing needs, budget requests, and their alignment with strategic priorities, which in turn help us determine the items that are included in the draft budget. In addition, we look at the revenue and expenditures to date and analyze any deviations that may need to be considered for the next year's budget. In June, the property appraiser releases the preliminary taxable property values, which assists the city in budgeting for its largest source of general fund revenue, which is property taxes. Subsequently, a round of budget workshops are held with the City Commission where the departments are able to present and discuss their recommendations for the upcoming budget year. In the beginning of July, the property appraiser issues the final taxable property values, and the City Commission adopts the tentative property tax rates based on these values. In mid-July, the state of Florida issues their projected shared revenues that cities and counties will receive from them for funds related to sales tax, communication service taxes, and fuel taxes. Once the tentative property tax rate is set, budget staff is able to prepare the budget recommendation and capital improvement plan. Per the city charter requirements, the budget recommendation is provided to the city commissioners no later than August 15th. In September, 2 public hearings are held and taxpayers are given the opportunity to make public statements to the city commission about the budget and or tax rates. The budget is officially adopted at the second public hearing, and not long after, the new fiscal year begins. Slide. So with that, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Tesla. Next, Ms. Tinsley will provide a presentation on the revenue forecast for fiscal year 21.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners and city manager and assistant city managers and staff. I'm going to present sorry, let me do that, I guess. There we go. Okay. So my presentation is on the revenue forecast for FY, oops, I'm upside down. I'm just not going to video right now because I don't know how to fix that. Sorry. The revenue forecast for FY 2021. I just kind of want to set the stage a little bit in that revenue forecasting is not a simple task, and nor does, as Allison indicated, is something that ends at budget adoption, but continues throughout on an ongoing basis. And so as we continue to receive better and more perfect information, it allows us to make those adjustments, positive or negative, so that we can budget appropriately. We have been receiving information as late as of this afternoon. And so I've been making adjustments to the slides to try to give you as current an information as I possibly can. In doing so, that has unfortunately revealed some technical difficulties. As I go through the slides, I will point those out to you, but the information is sound and we will continue to improve and finalize the numbers as best we can for FY21 budget adoption. And so on this slide, we do talk about the outlook. And so many of you are probably thinking, I've been on here for 3 months, what do I know? Well, this has been seriously a group team effort. With leadership and input from Dave, Angela, and Tom, as well as the other department leaders. And as Dave mentioned, Tri-Merge Consulting Group has helped in developing these revenue projections, along with myself, helped me through this. And so in doing so, we took a look back through the Great Recession time period to a look now for the past year, and then through COVID so far, and then a look forward into how we can best come up with revenue projections going forward. So as we move to the next slide, let's take a little bit of a look back and then forward in looking at the general fund total fund balance. And as you can see, we had some low points towards the end of the Great Recession. And as you see, we can see the significant recovery that Deerfield Beach has seen over the last 5 to 6 years and has remained steady as such. the fund balance includes, as we go to the next slide, as you see, it is a healthy fund balance, and it includes your emergency reserves of 3.4 million, as well as unassigned fund balance of 17.6 million. So the unassigned fund balance, as I indicated during the CAFRA presentation, more than meets the 10% target of the fund balance policy. In fact, it is approximately 17%. With such a great unassigned fund balance, we do have good solid bond ratings at a AA minus. So this should kind of help provide some comfort in knowing that we are starting off on a good solid foundation as we are heading into this pandemic recession that is occurring now. And so as we move to the next slide, some of the overall goals and objectives and initiatives related to the revenue is that basically we need to be good stewards of our citizen taxpayer dollars. We need to monitor our performance. We need to communicate and maintain accountability and transparency. And as we're going through the AG operational audit, that it drives the prioritization of the policies and procedures that we need. And so as we move to the next slide, we're going to take a look at the major revenue sources for the general fund. Here's one of the first of some technical difficulties that we've had in trying to continuously update information. So the slide, the pie chart to your left is pulling data that as we are updating information and it continues to update to percentages. All the way to the right is a table that is basically a cut and paste into the slide. And so therefore we miss updating the, because it's hard coded, we miss updating, for example, the ad valorem tax. It says 44%, it should really say 46%. But the bigger picture is that basically your ad valorem tax is almost half of the revenue sources for the general fund. And then the remaining pieces like the permits, fees, things like that is about 13%, and the remaining is charges for services and public tax, service tax. And as we move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how the millage rate is set. And so the ad valorem tax is to cover the operating and debt associated with running the city. The city manager is recommending to maintain the operating millage rate at 6.0018, which represents a decrease of over 7.23% from the previous year's general fund budget. The rollback rate, which would have provided the same tax revenue that was levied for this year, is 5.6495. All right, and as we move on to the next slide, we're looking at what is the proposed general fund all sources. So again, the big takeaway here is that out of 100, yes.
Sorry, can we just go back one slide? I just want to clarify something real quick.
Sure,
When
absolutely.
we talk about 7.23% decrease over the previous year, I had mentioned that we have about a 5% decrease from last fiscal year. What this includes is the overall general fund budget to include the CRA portion of the ad valorem tax. If you were to include that, the total overall is approximately 7.23.
Yep, correct. Thank you for that clarification. So here is the 102.8 million is the general fund resources. And again, your largest portion of that is coming from your ad valorem taxes at about 44%. And there's this chart breaks it down even into a little more granular detail as to where the sources of revenues are coming from. And so special assessment is the next kind of largest piece at 12.7%. And then the sales and use tax at 10.7%. And that covers public utility, communication, sales, and local business tax. And so as we move on to the next slide, I won't go through this in any excruciating detail. I guess not at all. Okay. So then this is just some information to explain what are the different types of revenue and a description or definition of what they are. And so this slide is just for informational purposes, and you can read it at your leisure. And so moving on to the next slide. So we took a 5-year look back, or maybe more like a 3-year look back with the current year, and then FY21 estimate going forward. And as you can see, taxes, all taxes together, had a nice little steady clip going up. And one of the things I'm going to point out later in a slides outward is that this really represents the growth that Deerfield has been experiencing over these last several years, as the millage rate has either remained flat or has gone down. So it's the uptick in value, as well as the sales and business license and things like that. So it's, again, a good solid foundation going forward into what may be some difficult times coming up. So if we want to move to the next slide, again, just another look at how the ad valorem tax has fared over the last several years. And it's been a nice slope upward and kind of a little bit of a flattening. As for our estimates, this is us internally making estimates based on information that we receive from the state and applying some calculations and logic to it. So, and we just kind of flattening it out there. So as we go to the next slide, so the ad valorem tax, this is how it's calculated. So the total estimated tax at 45.1, we back out the CRA's tax incremental allocation of a little over 2 million. And that's actually an uptick for CRA at about 100,000. And so then therefore the projected is at 43.1, which is just a little bit lower than the FY20 at 43.4.
And once again, I just want to point out that we'll get the final tax values somewhere right after July 1st.
Correct. And so as we move to the next slide, the millage rate history, again, we went all the way back to 08, and we brought it all the way through to propose at 21. And so over the previous, from 17 going forward, you can see that the millage rate overall has either remained flat or has gone down, and we're recommending that it remains the same for FY20. And so as we move on to the next slide. So here again, big picture, total revenue sources. Taxes make up more than half of the revenue sources, as it should. Permits, fees, assessments is the next biggest chunk. And then the balance is made up of a series of 4 or 5 other different types of revenue sources. And again, the pie chart is pulling from source data. The table to the right is a cut and paste from a different source where we wanted to be able to see the bigger numbers and be able to see it better. And we didn't keep up with keeping that right table up to date as we were updating the data that was backing up the pie chart. So as we move on to the next slide, which is we're going to highlight briefly the enterprise funds, and we do have 3 major enterprise funds. And overall, I believe this was one of the information where we were just getting data in, I believe as of this afternoon. I was having a hard time keeping up with all my emails and things like that. And for overall, we came up, it seems like there's approximately 47.1 million for all 3 major enterprise funds together. We are still working through estimates for that. We had a really long conversation last week, went into the evening with Dave and Tom and Angela on the thought process on estimating and the collections and things like that. And so one of the things that we want to take a look at before we finalize anything related to the final numbers is kind of seeing, as we have sort of opened back up, and we are taking in the payments, and we're going back into some sort of business as usual, sort of, that let's see how the collections are coming in. Initially, we were very, very conservative, but there may be, as we see things are happening and ticking up, there may be some room to allow for a little bit more less conservative thought process going forward. And so as we move on to the next slide, and I'm going to talk really fast because I'm over my time. Again, same thing, just a different look. About 83% of the revenues for enterprise funds is charges for services. The rest, 15%, is the cash carryover with the enterprise funds. They have both operating and capital projects within the one enterprise and within each enterprise fund. So that's what that indicates there. And so as we move to the next slide, again, just another look at how we are a look back and a look forward. And so we see that basically we are being conservative, as well as looking at the capital projects and operating, and just making some decisions at this point. That may change in the next day or so as we are monitoring and watching, and hopefully there'll be a little more flexibility upwards in those revenue estimates. And so as we move to the next slide, these are a list of other major funds. And I've been receiving information into not too long ago, actually, on some of these funds as well. And we'll be looking very closely at these, and these tend to be more funds that should be sort of balanced or have revenues that are specifically tied to the program that they that the operations is for. And so with that, if we move to the next slide, which is almost my last slide, is just some thought processes that I was going through, and some revenue opportunities and enhancements, is that we want to look at ways to improve our rate of collections. And so we're beginning that process now, and I will talk about that in my financial services presentation, and then analyze user fees in a way to maybe do some recommendations on some full program cost recovery options as we go along throughout this process now and into the future. So with that, if you have any questions for me, otherwise we can move on to the next one, so I can prepare for my next presentation in about 10 minutes.
I don't see any hands raised. I think we can continue to move forward. Yes, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Parnas.
I have one question. Is it anticipated that property values will still go up this year?
Vice
Yes.
Mayor, yes, it is anticipated that the property values will continue to increase through fiscal year 21, because the values of the properties have not been impacted by the economic downturn at this time.
Therefore,
There is,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
if the economic downturn continues and becomes more substantial, it is likely that that would occur next fiscal year.
I see. So, but for this coming projected year, 21, we expect to collect more taxes on property.
The property values have increased for fiscal year 21 in the city of Deerfield Beach, correct?
That will be somewhat of a help to us.
It's the non-ad valorem sources of revenue that are taking a significant loss.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Drosky?
Thank you, Mayor. It's either for the city manager or for the CFO. I'm trying to get some of the background. I'm scrolling through the presentation on the monitor here next to me at the same time, but what is the current year's general fund budget? I know you're proposing 102.8 million for next year, but what is it this year?
108.4, I believe, Commissioner.
108.4. Okay, so 108.4 to 102. So that's roughly, I'm going to just use round numbers, is a $6 million reduction. However, on the slides that Stephanie just went through on the, bear with me, I'm scrolling through, on the, looks like 11 of 20, it looks like the revenue forecast actually is higher. This year was 41.7 million. You're estimating 43.4 for next year, which is a difference of 1.7 million plus or minus. So the 6 minus 1.7 is, so you're down to what, four something million is the difference, the gap. Is my logic on cue so far? Are you following me?
I'm gonna have to be honest, Commissioner, and say I am not.
Okay, let me start over. So this year's budget is 108.4 million. And next year it's proposed at 102.8, which is a difference of roughly, let's just use round numbers of 6 million.
Okay.
However, the revenue is actually forecast to go up by 1.7 million. Let's call it 2, just to make the math easy, by 2 million. It's not quite 2 million. So that $6 million gap actually is cut by 2 million because of the increased revenue. So that leaves a $4 million gap between this year's budget and next year's proposed budget. Is that?
When you say there is a $2 million increase, are you talking in terms of ad valorem tax revenue?
Yes, that's on slide 11.
Okay, yes. But the non-ad valorem tax revenue sources are going down that much. So conversely, so the budgetary, when you speak to the budgetary gap for next fiscal year, it's in terms of how much lower we have to reduce the expenditures from what you're going to be presented this evening and for the next 2 evenings, which amounts to approximately right now about $5 million.
Okay. I mean, I showed the gap at 4. Was there a slide with respect to the non-ad valorem decrease of revenue projections? Was that in Ms. Tinsley's presentation?
Not specifically in the presentation, but we do have those figures at great length, and I'd be happy to get those to each and every one of you.
Well, I'm just trying at the outset to get a, my mindset going, where we're going, where we are, where we're going, and what we need to do in between. And I'm just trying to paint that picture in my head. Because now we're going to go department by department and we're going to get very specific, but that's not going to mean a lot to me if I don't know the big picture first.
So, Commissioner, if I may, the big picture is that the current general fund budget that you will be presented for these next 3 evenings except for a very specific slide on everybody's presentation, which is contingency budget, just leave that out of the picture, is approximately $108 million. So we've got about a $5 million gap still. Every department was told, we still have some work to do, but granted what we've been faced with, this is where we're at today. And so the contingency budget represents programs, services, various line items that are being considered to further reduce the budget. I felt it was only fair and correct and right for the city commission to see those things, to provide their input and their recommendations, so that when we do conclude with these budget workshops, that we have direction on how we should further reduce this budget. Because there has been so much removed from it already, as you will see, that we are getting to the point where it's tough this time. And I hope that answers your question.
Mostly. So we're looking for an additional 5 million in cuts over the next 3 nights. That's what you're looking to get direction from us?
I'm not asking for specifics, and I'm not asking you to look at each item and start to calculate, but I am looking for some feedback on those on that specific slide, which you'll see as soon as Ms. Tinsley starts with her financial services presentation. Things that you may agree with, not agree with, have no, maybe maybe you don't have an opinion, and that's fine too. But that's where we're looking to get the input from the commission.
Okay, let's see how it goes.
And if I may add, it may be slide 8 that you would want to focus on, because that's the big picture slide, which shows the FY 2021 proposed general fund resources at 102.8. Yep, that's it. That's the slide that you kind of want to focus on. And so I only focused on the real big piece of it, which was the ad valorem tax. I did not go into a lot of detail about the rest of it, just to indicate that they're there. And so that's what is right now at this point.
Any other comments? I see Commissioner Preston, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I do. Mr. City Manager, you've gone to all of the departments and you have asked them to, asked them to cut to see where we can save. And so with that being done, we're still at a $5 million shortfall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so is there any more room for them to be able to take that second look? For instance, when we look at all of our expenses, is there room to make additional cuts? For instance, we talked about, saving money, from brought up about contractual services, but that's not just from one category of general workers, but have we looked at administrative fees for things that we do that we can take that second look and cut, whether it's with the general employees or with the administrative employees? Or have we reached a point where you just say, if we look at those things, we can't cut anymore? Is there money to be saved? in our ability to perform certain duties that right now that we may have outsourced.
Commissioner, every department has a contingency slide where I've asked them to come up with additional cost-saving measures to present to the City Commission for their consideration. Those slides will speak to exactly what you're asking me. And they are within each presentation that you will see from each department this evening, tomorrow night, and the night after that.
Okay, let me just ask you this, Mr. City Manager. Being that we're kind of being positioned in a crisis manner, do we presently have a hold on all expenses basically for 2020?
No, we can't put a hold on all expenses, Commissioner. We have obligations on many of our on certain payments, on particular contractual obligations, payments that we have to make, whether it be for the Broward Sheriff's Office or debt service and those sorts of expenses, which are very large expenses. But in terms of discretionary spending, we have halted a lot of that this fiscal year, yes.
With that $5 million shortfall that we're looking at, if I understood Ms. Tinsley, we have a pretty healthy fund balance. And so I know that we have, correct me if I'm wrong, I know that we have hurricane season coming up, and we need to be aware of that. But we could actually, I mean, that unassigned fund balance is for, a rainy day. Our fund balance is for a rainy day. It seems to me that we're in that rainy day, and that we could make up that shortfall out of the fund balance. Is that right or not?
So that is correct, but I don't want to confuse fiscal year 20 with fiscal year 21, because
Okay.
fiscal year 20, we already, as you know, and as I presented to you, we already have a revenue shortfall in
Right.
fiscal year 20.
Right.
And that it makes it very difficult in the middle of a fiscal year to be, more difficult to be making adjustments. Here, we are planning for fiscal year 21,
Right.
which is still, months away. And so we can plan for that, and we can reduce our expenditures so that we don't have to. We can do that. Or you may look at the budget and you may look at these contingency slides and say, no, don't do any of that, and use the unassigned fund balance to bridge that gap if you need to. You, by all means, you could certainly do that for fiscal year 21. But we are presenting contingency budget line items, which are programmatic or policy level decisions for the City Commission to consider, so that we can further reduce the budget to balance it for fiscal year 21.
Well, I'm a little bit confused. But for 2020, are we looking at can we look at the fund balance or not
Oh, yes, you can.
for 2020?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, yeah, that's what so there are various funds that we have. The emergency fund has $3.4 million in it. We have the unassigned. How much money is in the enterprise fund?
There are several enterprise funds, Commissioner.
Mhm.
So I would need to know which one you're speaking about, and I probably don't have that information in my hands right now, but I could certainly get it in between the presentations to provide that to you. And when you say how much money do we have, I'm just wondering if you're asking, what do you mean by money? Are we talking about the entire budget of the fund? Are we talking about the unassigned balance?
No, we're talking about the total fund.
The total fund budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for which enterprise fund, Commissioner? We have the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, we have the Solid Waste Fund, the Utility Fund, the Building Fund. I would need to know which one unless you're talking about all the enterprise funds together.
And that's what I was talking about. That's what I'm thinking of.
And are we talking about proposed for fiscal year 21, or are you asking what fiscal year 20 looks like?
I'm asking for what fiscal year 20 looks like.
Okay. I will get that information to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? I'm going to say this as we move forward. We received this material at about 2 o'clock today. So I'm hoping for some clarity as we move forward with this information. And the presentation, I'm a little, the way it's being presented so far, I'm a little concerned, I'll be honest with you. So let's hope for some more clarity as we move forward.
I recognize that, Mayor. I certainly do. I will tell you that I am, the budget presentations as they're presented are more solid than what was just done.
Okay. And again, we didn't have a lot of prep time for what we're reviewing here tonight.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's move forward and see where we end up.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Gans, Vice Mayor Parnas, City Commissioners, citizens, and visitors of Deerfield Beach. I am Angela Adediran, Assistant City Manager. Thank you for allowing me to present the FY21 citywide programs and initiatives this evening. Next slide, please. The FY21 budget is comprised of those things that we are legally mandated to accomplish and our contractual obligations. It is also comprised of our operational costs to provide essential operations and services to our community. To the greatest extent possible, we are working to create efficiencies wherever possible and without compromising our conscientious strive for consistency and excellence, cost-effective stewardship, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and public safety and maintenance of our facilities and infrastructure. Next slide, please. Prior to mid-March 2020, Deerfield Beach was well underway in its budget development cycle. Departments delivered planned improvements to capital assets and management of our assets. We were in the trenches of looking at technology improvements that would substantially improve our administrative operations with the new ERP system. Slated for proposal in the FY21 budget were cost of living adjustments, merit increases, and fully funded programs, staffing, and personnel. Next slide, please. The impact of COVID-19 on the worldwide economy has not left Deerfield Beach without impact. Based on today's and the foreseeable future's economic climate, Deerfield Beach is in a position of having to take away a number of the things that were on our wish list, which means deferral of some capital improvements, maintaining our aged equipment and facilities just a little while longer, consolidating existing technology and maintenance agreements, and funding staff in accordance with the deliverables that we are able to make in this climate. Next slide, please. This budget provides a fiscal plan that, again, for the foreseeable future, looks at our economic climate. It also looks at the reduction in state shared revenues, a gradual increase in our local revenues, our market movement to be in an upward swing as we monitor month by month the recovery period. It also looks at no change in our millage rates. Next slide, please. The overall general fund budget proposed is $102.8 million, which represents a 5.3% decrease from fiscal year 2020. It also reflects our estimated available resources based on decreases in federal, state, and local revenues. It is a very responsible approach to fiscal constraints that exist in this climate. We invest in the continued enhancement of a business-friendly community. We are supporting our residents with programs and services that are essential to their well-being, also while meeting our, again, mandated and contractual obligations for Deerfield Beach. Next slide, please. The Senior Services Fund, which is our active aging program, will also see an 8% decrease from fiscal year 2020 in fiscal year 21, which reflects reductions in response to the lack of ability to provide programs and services because of COVID-19 and the CDC guidelines and requirements for in-house services. However, they do continue to provide some services to our residents by restructuring the staff and the use of staff. Also, the reduction in essential services for the active aging community. Next slide, please. And the Solid Waste Fund of the proposed budget of about $16.2 million. Again, these numbers are fluid. That represents an 8.3% decrease over fiscal year 2020. It also reflects departmental consolidation in sanitation management and reductions in debt service, reductions also in non-departmental costs. Next slide, please. The total utility fund proposed is about $28.5 million, which is a 3.1% decrease from fiscal year 2020. It is a conservative administrative approach also to the fiscal constraints. It is based on the development and activation of a new billing system, new meters, and also invest in the enhancement of our customer service, billing, and payment systems. We're looking at new options for our customers to be able to pay their bills online. It also supports mandated water quality treatment for public consumption and safety. Next slide, please. So overall, our fiscal year 21 key budget strategies are based on these principles. The adaptation to shifts in the global market, understanding the current and future economic system, delivering quality public services and programs, and facilitating unemployment rebound, and focusing on workforce investment and training in the new market needs. We are also proposing this budget to develop staff and infrastructure to enhance our overall community optics. Next, Ms. Tinsley will go over the financial services budget to provide an insight into what our future FY21 budget reveals. If you have any questions, I will take them at this time.
Not seeing any, I think we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now go into the actual budget for the Financial Services Department.
Hey, good evening again. So the Financial and Customer Services Department, we have a number of divisions that fall under that department. And just to set the stage again, the Financial Services Department has been going through what I would call a renaissance. For the past year, they have seen a turnover in various key positions not only just the CFO and the ADF, but also several accountants that are a year or less on the team, as well as a parking supervisor and a senior buyer that have been on board for about 6 months, along with a payroll coordinator and the CFO who have been here for approximately 3 months. And also, of course, the ADF position remains vacant as we begin to do the recruitment on that role. So with all of that going on, as well as the COVID-19, the whole entire team has had to learn to adapt to the challenges and stretch our abilities to be agile and responsibility through COVID-19. We've had to be able to turn on a dime on a number of things and change all along the way in the environment of COVID-19. With all of that, they were still able to meet some goals for FY20. We did improve the fiscal oversight by reducing findings and observations as presented with the CAFR. And that consisted of support from other departments. We've also created the procurement SOP for the procurement code manual. We've also increased the P-card rebates by $11,000, and that's approximately 35% of the procurement operating budget. And things like this, as small as it may seem, given the environment that we are in and going to approach into, every little bit can help. We've also increased the certifications. We've earned the certified professional public buyer, as well as the certified public finance officer certifications, both nationally recognized certifications. Also national awards that have been earned from the National Procurement Institute, Achievement of Excellence in Procurement. It's the first time for this city that award has been earned. And we continue to earn the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award and a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for multiple years going forward. These aren't just rubber stamp awards. These are national awards that have rigorous standards, and we stand the test of their scrutiny from outside objective reviewers who can provide constructive feedback from a place of sound experience. We've also, wasn't necessarily a goal at the beginning of FY20, but we have implemented the DMV registration hold, which began in March. And to date, we have collected over $2,100. And so these are initiatives that, as we see the challenges on revenue collections, that we are actively pursuing and trying to implement as quickly as possible. And so the next slide, please. And so our goals, as we have currently gone through as a team, is that, of course, improve the financial close and year-end audit process, which continue to be the finding from the CAFR. Also collaborate with HR to implement payroll best practices. Again, that was an observation that was still in the CAFR. And so we want to address those and clear those up. We want to develop and execute a plan of action from the Auditor General's results from the operating audit, as already indicated in the revenue slides. And basically that's all looking at the organization and assessing and improving upon procedures and processes. The next several slides are really important in this recessionary time, because we do want to try to increase our vendor participation, which increases competition, and we get better value for our taxpayer dollars. We also want to improve upon our operating CIP planning. We want to conduct training, and we want to analyze our counts and categories and to better mirror and reflect and show transparency to the CAFR, as well as just overall planning going forward into the budget year and do strategy thinking. We want to increase our outreach and recovery collection efforts as much as possible. We want to collect on those utility accounts. We want to collect on parking citations, ambulance fees, which is a huge portion of our accounts receivable, as well as partner with the building and codes for property liens as well. And then finally, we need to implement our pay stations for parking, the capital upgrade program, which I'll talk a little bit more about when I go to parking. And so then the next slide, please. So financial and customer services incorporates 6 different divisions, 3 of which are, well, 5 of which are actually in the general fund, and of course, 1 that's in the utility fund, which is the customer service and billing service. Within the general fund, we're split between the functions of administration with finance, budget, and purchasing, and public safety with parking authority and the crossing guards. And so our overall, when you add them all up, our overall budget together is almost $4 million, which is a reduction of $481,000. And so I will go through each one a little more detail as we go along. So then the next slide is the finance. And so the budget from FY20 to 21 and the changes, the personnel changes involve defunding the part-time cashier at $26,000 and other salary savings due to the turnover and vacancy of approximately $64,000. And then the operating expenditure, the reduction relates to the ERP system, not moving forward with that, and with a savings of approximately $500,000. As you can see, looking at this budget, 80% of this budget is personnel services. So it does become a little bit of a challenge when we have to do 10%, 20% cuts, when 80% of your budget is actually personnel related, including fully loaded compensation with salaries and benefits included. So in the next slide, and you'll see the trend as we continue to go through each one. So purchasing contract administration, again, same thing. The variance here is reduction in insurance services, as well as reduction in annual vendor outreach and office supplies. So we've all tried to attempt to cut as much as possible initially. And as you can see, something like this would affect one of our goals. And here, personnel services are 93% of their budget. And if you want to move to the next slide, budget and performance, again, reduction in intern program hours and insurance services, and then a reduction in other contractual services for ADA remediation and travel and training. Again, it impacts ability to provide the service levels that we may need in order to do budget and performance better. And again, total personnel services makes up over 81% of that budget. And go to the next slide. Parking authority. And so here with this, the personnel, the savings is basically the turnover savings with hiring a new parking supervisor. And then the increase in banking charges, 400,000 of that 535 is banking charges related to the services provided from the meter collections, credit card use, things like that. And it increased about $100,000. And so with some other cuts that they tried to take, they absorbed some of it within their budget, going over by about increasing at 64,000, 65,000. And then the capital outlay piece, which is the portion of the pay station upgrades currently with the Calais contract. The, Calais, we've been in contract for over 5 years. The initial investment in their systems and software and their hardware was, I believe, approximately $400,000. And so now it's come time to do the hardware and software upgrades. And so the plan is to do the upgrades over, I believe, a 5-year period so that we can absorb this cost in a reasonable fashion. And so the next slide. So the crossing guards, even though there's personnel services and operating expenditure, the operating expenditure is the contractual services for the crossing guards. So we have some city employees, about half, that are city employees that are crossing guards, and we contract out half. The numbers are still the same. We still need the total number of crossing guards to provide the service to the school system. And so then the next slide. So the utility billing and customer service operating budget. Here, 64% of their budget is personnel services, and they're pretty much flat at this point in time. Okay. And so as we move forward with future considerations, so as we think through going forward, we're looking at the long-term economic recovery and growth after going through this recession. We're looking at ways to do revenue enhancements by doing things like coming up with a mitigating fine schedule, doing the amnesty, doing something to doing a third-party collection system, doing an RFP for that to try to get those dollars in that we need. Unfortunately, we have unfunded mandates. Every time there's a GASB or OMB or other state and local ordinances that dictate how we have to present our financials, anything that we have to implement, typically it's a cost to us. There are consultants and advisors and actuarials and things like that. As a matter of fact, one will be coming to the next council meeting to discuss the OPEB. Those analysis don't come for free. So, and we are forced to absorb those costs in our budget. Same thing with ADA compliance. It's a cost to us. And so we have to absorb those costs. The new ERP and other automations and upgrades, even though we're not doing it this year and not likely next year, it's something that we need to begin to prepare for to do. Our systems are antiquated and cannot do the things that we want it to do. There's still heavy manual updates and increases and things like that, and interfaces that are not stable and do not work consistently, and we rely heavily upon the IT department in order to assist there. And so we think about things like virtual permits, again, something to keep that task of rekeying things into a system from a paper application to have to key it into a system. We're thinking about things like that. We're thinking about lobby kiosks. There'll be more self-service applications and payments, things like that. So people can, no different than when you go into Walmart to do your self-checkout that way as well. And then of course, the continuing the pay station capital upgrade program as well. OpenGov financial transparency tool, that contract comes due in 2022. I believe the cost is at $35,000. I believe Allison can probably, I believe it's $35,000. And of course, anything other continuous process improvements and internal controls, such as procurement code revisions and taxable fringe benefits. IRS is always changing, and so we have to keep up to date what they do. And so the next slide talks about the contingency budget. We were tasked with trying to come up with additional 10% in reductions. And so the first one, I'm not going to go through them all, but the first one is really an initiative where we look at our bank charges and we saw that we are really absorbing fees that are taking the place of, well, every time we have to do a cut, we're cutting something else, but we're trying to compensate for bank charges. So this is kind of part of being a user fee to pass this through to recoup the bank fee costs. Mobile user apps are already, mobile app users are already paying a 35-cent transaction per fee. Those that are paying by credit card at the pay stations are not. And so if we charge the same for 35 cents, we will recoup as a revenue source to offset the bank charges at about 170,000. If we want to do a full recovery, it's approximately 46 cents, which would bring in approximately $232,000. The next piece was the to cut the contractual services for the part-time cashier and the receptionist position. And that would just end up reducing customer service levels. Also about $5,000 from the budget for, and we would not be able to get assistance with ad hoc reporting and things like that. The next one, interactive voice response, IVR, $30,000 is in the budget, but they had gone out for RFP, I believe, once already, and there was only one vendor that could provide that service, and 30,000 didn't come close to what they were asking for. So until more funding is identified or a different approach, that is something that definitely could be on the chopping block. The rest of the items are things that will, in one way or another, affect our ability to provide the services that we have been providing. Doesn't mean that we can't provide a different level of service or have a different approach, but it does affect and affects the training as we ask people to do more and to expand what they are capable of doing. And so that's kind of some of the things with the travel and training and the dues and memberships and having access to information. So the next few slides are basically related to that first initiative. Just to show how the annual credit card sales are in comparison to the mobile app. And as you, the mobile app is continuing to go up little by little. So the 35 cents is not too much of a hindrance to them. And maybe it would even push people to, if they want to do the credit card, maybe they'll go ahead and do the app instead. And that will be a lot less hardware for us to maintain if more people did their app instead of credit card payments at those pay stations. But you can see the volume that we have there. And then the next slide. This is the number of transactions that we see. And so that's where our numbers, when we look up, and again, mobile payment is slowly ticking up, and we can actually see a little bit of a slope downward on a credit card. So people are transitioning to the mobile app. The next slide, please. So the coin transaction trends, again, the coin is on a down credit card sales are slowly, but the mobile app is kind of what's going up. And so, and as we see the coin transactions, even though they are not charged any kind of transaction fee, it does cost us, because part of that fee is forgot the name of the company that comes and picks up all the cash from our office every day and takes it onto the bank for us. Brinks, that's what it was. And then the final slide, I believe, is the hypothetical, I guess if it was to be implemented, put in place, what we would think, what would be the impact. I think with that, that's it. If we have any questions.
You can just go back to the contingency side, please. Thank you. One thing I want to point out to the commission is the bank charges actually did not exist before this payment system came into place when we had the old coin operated system. So those are charges that we've incurred over time. And initially, you know, they were relatively low for the first year or two, which is not even reflected on these. But they have crept up over time now that our community has gotten used to the credit card payment. I'll leave with that with any questions for the City Commission.
I see Commissioner Preston and Commissioner Hudak. Commissioner Preston?
Yes, okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
What I'd like to know from Mrs. Tinsley is when you look at the 2021 budget in comparison to 20, what percentile of the budget is being saved for 21? In other words, we have, you know, for fiscal year 2021, in comparison to 2020, is there a 10% saving, 20% saving? How much is that? And whatever that percentile is, what is that represented in actual dollars?
So just for under my department, are you talking about? Correct?
Yes.
So we reduced our, it's actually slide probably, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. That gives a summation there. So our initial cut was approximately 11%. If you, yeah. So that's the summation there with the overall adjustment. And
so the savings would be 481,000. Is that it?
Correct, before contingency budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Hudak?
Thank you. Couple of questions. First, a general observation. If going forward, we could get the slides numbered, it makes it a little easier during the presentation when we have questions to go back to a specific slide. So I would really appreciate that if we could do that. The first question I have is last year at this time, maybe even a year and a half ago, we had a lot of challenges in the finance department, and most of the blame was placed on this current ERP system that was causing fits. So I know we have to look for cuts, but if this ERP system that we currently have is the cause for most of the challenges in the finance department, what is it actually costing us to keep this current system? Because I know that there were a lot of challenges with that. So I guess I could start with that one.
So yes, the system, and I'm probably also going to defer to Ron, and maybe I think he comes up right behind me anyway. Yes, the systems are challenging. We have a number of subsystems that we work through. So we have a payroll system that interfaces with the main accounting system. We have a fixed asset system that's outside, that is also, we try to interface, or we do things. So yes, it is a challenging system. We have a billing system that cannot move with us as we come up with programs and things that we want to move forward with within the billing system. So yes, it is a challenge, and I have been working with Dave and company to come up with other options and ways of funding a new ERP system. But again, just the way that the situation is with the recession and the budget revenue shortfalls and the cuts that we have to take, I think we all believe that is prudent to maybe hit the pause button until we can see if we have some recovery sooner rather than later. But I believe it is a high priority.
If I could
mean-
add- Oh,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
thank you. Not only that, Commissioner, but the planning for an ERP can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
I'm aware, yep.
So just because we're not throwing dollars at the project right now doesn't mean that we're not going to move forward. Now, I mean, you can't move forward with an ERP system without a chief financial officer, because if they're not there between the CFO and the CIO, they run that project, and they will run that project. They've already discussed it. But when you talk about 12 to 18 months from now, going through the procurement and planning process, all of the testing that you'll need to do and all the demonstrations that you'll have each one of these vendors do, we know that putting dollars to it right now is not needed either, because we can get through that process from now and through the next fiscal year, and then have the dollars set aside when we have, hopefully at that time, some better understanding what the actual costs will be for the system with a particular vendor as well.
And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I thought 18 months ago, we had started that process. And so I was under the assumption that by now we were ready to move forward, because the picture that was painted to me 18 months ago was, this is the cause of all of our issues. It's causing us to have extra individuals, do extra steps, extra systems that do not communicate with one another, and it caused a litany of issues. So to find out that we really haven't even started looking at another system, and I understand it's a different can of worms that you'll have to look into, but that's just kind of concerning. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I was led to believe 18 months ago, and maybe the new CFO has found workarounds that work better than the previous CFO. But what I was led to believe 18 months ago was the cause of the majority of the issues in the finance department was this ERP system. So I'll leave it at that. I believe it was on slide 8. Slide 8. I didn't understand increase in banking charges of $400,000 for increase of $100,000. I did not understand that. The slide.
Okay.
Slide number 8.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably put too many increases in there. So the total banking charges for FY21 is $400,000, which is an increase of $100,000.
Okay.
That's, yeah, I have an extra increase in there.
The last question I have, and I didn't see that, and I understand this is for fiscal year 2021. How long are we going to continue to retain the consultants? Are they going to go into 2021, or will they be done by 2020?
I have them being done by 2020 by August. That is when the AG operation audit is set to be complete. It may run a little bit into September, but I do, and I have them at a limited amount of dollars.
Okay, so that'll
by-
be additional savings for 2021 then, because we won't have to pay them.
That's correct.
And by complete, Commissioner, that's not that they will be complete, but our legwork to provide them all the information that they're requesting currently will be complete.
And so how long will we have the consultants? Do we have an anticipated end date?
August.
Oh, okay, so, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to piggyback on that because Commissioner Hudak hit on a lot of points that I had. And again, I think we've said this before, pages of all slides should be numbered so we can reference them easy. Customer service with the ERP system, it's a $500,000 cut. Is that what we're looking to make? And that's what the total price of this ERP system is going to be. Is that accurate?
Actually, no. The total cost of this ERP system truly is upwards of about $3 million, I believe. I actually, working with Ron, we worked together on putting together a CIP submission, but there is a lot of work, just as what Dave, Mr. Santucci has indicated. There's a lot of legwork up front to putting it together. And so
I'm going to pause you right there because I want to go back to this and ask Mr. Santucci this directly. I, much like Commissioner Hudak, thought this was already in the process. What has been the delay? Is it strictly because we changed CFOs? Is that what the issue is?
Well, not only did we change CFOs, we didn't have one since September. But additionally, we could have put dollars towards a consultant this year to start to begin that process. Because of our revenue shortfalls, that was taken off the table so that we can regroup and go ahead through an RFP process, begin the RFP process, do it internally, forgo those costs, and we're going to have to do it, most likely in-house at this point to get that done.
Okay, so I'm going to go to this, and maybe it's just me, and I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but there was a reason that the ERP system was pushed, and that was something that we were touting that we needed to do to solve a lot of the issues that we were having. Now where it's being, in my opinion, somewhat downplayed as being something that we're just going to start rolling into now. I think what's going to be helpful for me anyways is understanding what are we losing by not having this moving forward, not progressing on this like we had planned on doing. I know there's been setbacks, there's been changes over the last year, there's been a lot of things that have been unexpected, but this has been something that was a priority, I thought. So I think what we need to know is by cutting this, how much bone are we actually cutting? Right? I understand trimming the fat, but when you get to a point where you're cutting your nose off to spite your face, it's not a good thing. And I know you guys are the experts at this supposedly, and this is your recommendation, but I'm a little, I need some better explanation of why that's being cut and where we're at with it. And not progressing forward like I thought we were is disappointing to hear. You have any comment on that before I move on?
What I would say, Mayor, is that the approach that we'd like to take is that we procure the solution holistically, and we look to most likely finance that over a period of 5 years through a bank loan, rather than, because we're not going to be able to do 500,000 every single year. As Ms. Tinsley said, this will probably, the total solution will be a couple $1 million. So it's best to do it through a bank loan where we can pay that back over time, but you're obviously going to have to pay for the product and the services as it's being implemented for a much shorter period. And so rather than hit the budget with, probably over the course of 2 years, it'd have to be something like 1.5 million or 1.5 million. We think that it'd be more prudent to procure the solution, go after the financing, and then move forward from there.
Okay, my concern with that is this: those types of systems become antiquated fast. All right, I don't want us paying off down the road something that is going to be outdated by the time we actually get it paid off. That has me a little bit concerned there. Is this where the Cali system is? Is that what we're talking about here?
No, Mayor. The Calais system is the parking meter system.
Right. So
This
you're
would be-
looking to spread that over 5 years also, right? That's what was said?
The Calais system.
Yes.
We want to, one of the things that the displays on the actual meter,
Yeah.
that is, those displays are there's a much better display out there. One of the things that we recognize is some of our users in the sunlight have issues to actually see the displays. The entire capital expense is over $100,000, maybe even $200,000. So the plan there is to do that, just replace several at a time, and over 5 years we can replace the entire system. So that's the parking meter system, entirely different than the ERP.
Yeah. What concerns me, what I'm saying is the Cali system, you were looking at doing that spread out also. You're looking at doing the ERP spread out and doing financing. It sounds like those are things that tend to get antiquated pretty fast. Just like any computer software or any type of new technology comes forward. I don't want us to be in a situation. It's a little different than a building, which once it's built is going to stay there and last for a length of time. When we start talking about systems, that everything's kind of in flux with that, and it's just as frustrating with any of us at home who buy any type of software that, you know, it's antiquated by the time we get it out of the packaging in some cases. I'm a little concerned that we're making some judgments now that are going to put us in a position down the road, stretching things out to pay for them. And they're already by stretching out those payments, we're still paying for something that we're no longer using because it's antiquated. I just want to make sure we're not getting ourselves into that situation. The ERP system, I would like a better explanation to make sure we know what it's how that's gonna hurt us by not having it in place. Rather than replacing them all at once, you do them one at a time on the Calais, fine. That makes a little bit more sense. But just make sure that we're not in a situation in which we're slowly improving things that are going to be antiquated.
So, and just as a quick, and I've done some ERP implementation in my prior lives. The implementation typically happens within 12 to 18 months, you know, with some delays or things like that occur with people and changeover and stuff like that. But the system stays in place for a long period of time because it is so intensive, labor and time intensive. And so as long as we keep up with the system, if we go with a product and a service that is what most folks are using within our cities and our localities, a really known brand that doesn't change their name every 6 months, we have a product that we would be invested in for, you know, 10 to 15 years. And just like, you know, our systems, we have to constantly do those little upgrades. Our laptops and our software systems, we do the upgrades, but you know, we keep our laptops for, you know, a good little while. So it'd be the same thing with the ERP system. So it's not that we would take that long, 4 or 5 years to implement an ERP system. The implementation would still be close and tight as much as possible, but the payment of it would be over a longer period of time, more or less to match the use of the system to the dollars that go out to pay for it.
Okay. Commissioner Hudak?
Thank you. Just to follow up, and again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but you're right. It takes 18 months or so to implement an ERP system once you've chosen that system. I thought we chose a system last year. I was told this, the system that we have doesn't communicate, but there's a system out there that we have already chosen because all of the other cities are using it. So are you telling me that we haven't even chosen a system yet? I do understand, ERP systems cost a lot of money, but you do use them for a long time. It's based on the number of users you pay, and there's usually system upgrades every year or whatever the case may be. But it takes at least, 17, 18 months just to choose the right system. So are we at the point where we haven't even done our due diligence on the system that we want? Because as the mayor said, this system is costing us money. It's costing us time. We're losing reports. I know that there are other reports that were submitted late, and I was told it was because of this system. Billing was an issue, and I was told it was because of this system. So this system is already, by not having a proper system, has already cost us a lot of money and a lot of goodwill in the finance department. And so I'm a little concerned that we have not even started our due diligence in identifying the system that we want to move forward with. So where are we? And I know we're getting off track, and I do apologize, and I know it's late for everybody, but where are we in looking at the new system?
Our chief financial officer, he's very familiar with the product from Tyler, and he presented that option to our previous CFO and assistant director, along with our purchasing manager and our human resources director. They've looked at that system. As I said, without having the new CFO on board or an assistant director, we did not move forward with that product. It's important that there is buy-in across all of the departments to ensure that this is the right system for the city. So that system is still on the table. It's just a matter of us being able to take a closer look at the ERP, that particular ERP system. There is an existing contract that we can look at. But if that system does not seem to be the right fit for the city, it'd be my recommendation to go through an RFP process and allow ERP vendors to solicit our business, in which case the ERP process, like I said, usually contains, it's quite a lengthy procurement because you're going through demonstrations and some other things, because it's no small investment in terms of time, resources, or dollars. So that
wasn't going to cost us any money this year or next year, realistically, because by the time you get through all of that stuff, we're working on next year's budget. All right, I apologize for sidebar the conversation.
No, not at all. Any other questions? Okay, let's move forward.
The next presentation will be from our Chief Information Officer, Mr. McKenzie.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, Management Team, residents. My name is Ron McKenzie. I'm the Chief Information Officer, and I'll be presenting the budget for the Information Technology Services team, department for fiscal 21.
Ron, we're having you're having a lot of static on your headset. Can that change?
It changed.
Ron, did we lose you?
I think so.
No, sir, he's working on changing the microphone so that he can get audio from the computer. So just bear with us for a moment.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I use Sam? Eddie. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead, Ron.
Is it still a lot of background noise?
It's better.
Yes.
It's better.
Okay. Just a second. Okay. You heard my introduction. My name is Ron McKenzie. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the city. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, Management Team, residents. Here's a presentation for fiscal 21 for the Information Technology Services.
Excuse me, I'm getting a lot of echo.
Me too.
We will get, I'm going to use Samantha's set, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Ron.
It's about there's a whole bunch of it over here, so okay, let's try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Much better. Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of us over here in this room, so pardon me. Again, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, Management Team, residents. My name is Ron McKenzie. I'm the Chief Information Officer, and I'll be presenting the proposed budget for fiscal 21. As we start off, we'll talk about our achievements for fiscal 20. And the order of the achievements are based on goals that we set for fiscal 20. In the area of cybersecurity, we obtained and deployed Darktrace, which was an analytic tool. That was one of the goals, that we had to have a tool that's better able to analyze different type of things that are happening on the network. And we've got that and we deployed it. We also replaced end-of-life firewalls and backup equipment. We replaced internal storage, and we added cloud storage and tape backup to give a few different areas of backup just in case any type of issues occur. We maintained employee awareness and training through KnowBe4. We've passed all compliancy audits on all levels, and that was another issue that we had, just to make sure that we were compliant on all levels. We migrated maps from ArcGIS server to Esri Online, just making sure that nobody was able to enter through our firewall, and now to look at maps, etc., that's in the cloud. Speaking of the cloud, we implemented ArcGIS Online application.
Ron, I'm sorry, we're getting the echo again. Reverb from you, please.
All right. Just a second. We're going to go to different rooms. Turn off that one. Just leave the conference. Hello?
Much better.
Pardon us. We good? Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
And the last bullet, we implemented ArcGIS online applications, web mapping, and field data collection surveys. This allows a lot of our staff to be out in the field and to be able to take various different analytics, and they're able to put that information in, and it goes into the cloud automatically. Next slide, please. Other achievements we have were in the area of mobility. We implemented our citywide computer replacement program. We standardized the replacement frequency over all computing devices. Now it's all under the control of ITS, and we replace computers on a 4-year replacement schedule. We supported additional mobility needs for teleworking due to COVID-19. Those needs were, we purchased and deployed 18 new laptops, negotiated new VPN server with 100 licenses for simultaneous remote connections. We doubled our internet bandwidth circuit to allow for remote connections so people can work from home and still access the various resources here in the city. And we obtained and deployed Zoom virtual conference, which we're using now. Next slide. Other achievements around the enterprise. We established multi-factor authentication at Fire Station 102, which will be the norm as we move from other buildings. It's having something that you have and something that you know. So you put in a code and you also have your ID badge. In the commission chambers, we upgraded to allow for HD streaming. So now when we have commission meetings, we all look a whole lot better. We established a BSO VPN tunnel, which allows them to view cameras around the city 24/7. And we added 4 new sites to our city fiber network. We also established weekly virtual meetings for staff and officials on various software products used by the city. That's one I'm extremely proud of. It's one of those when you want to be the change that you want to see. I spoke with my staff and said, listen, we're deploying a lot of software, we're doing a lot of things. Let's try to find a way to train to make sure that people, even though they're home, they can still continue to learn and do better. And so we now have weekly trainings every Friday at 1 o'clock on various different software. So that's something that I'm really proud of with my team. Next slide, please. In the area of business continuity, we replaced 15-year-old mainframe system to include software, hardware, backup, and redundancy. And I thank the commission for giving us the money to finally replace some of this old archaic system. We obtained and installed a new tape backup system, which is an additional safety mechanism against cyber security or cyber attacks. We improved our test environment for One Solution, and we're working with the building department on GovEasy and on Laserfish. We also created a disaster recovery document and procedures, which better allows us to document and be prepared in case of various different emergencies. Next slide. Our goals for fiscal 21. As we've talked about, definitely to serve on the DFB ERP replacement project team and be one of the core people involved with that process. Also to increase cybersecurity awareness and resources, and I'll speak to the resources in a little bit. As far as business continuity, we want to implement Laserfish for Human Resource Department and Active Aging Department. This allows them to take some of the paper documents that they have and scan them to make them digital. Quite important as we look to do the upgrade at City Hall and also to do the move at Active Agent to make sure that none of these papers that are extremely important get wet or anything like that. So we wanted to make sure we digitize them. Also integration of Cognos reporting system with One Solution and Naviline. So we have a standard reporting system, and then automation of permit processing for engineering division to add them also into GovEasy. Next slide. In the other areas of GIS or Geographic Information Systems, one of our goals is to examine various Esri products and establish methods to integrate GIS with a minimum of 3 business areas that are not currently using GIS techniques. GIS is a very important tool. It allows you to tell a story and see a picture, and everyone says a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we're able to track, even if people want to see, like we have a map that's up there, and one of the maps allows people to see various different funding sources on different projects that they have, and they're able to see the development that's happened. And so these are various different things, and GIS tells a really great story, and I want to be able to implement GIS with 3 departments that are currently not using it. Clean up existing geospatial data to ensure its reliability and easy access for various city systems, especially addresses. Addresses is one of the big things that we have to clean up. As it comes to addresses here, the input over the years, people have inputted street, S-T-R-E-E-T, street, S-T, and so that creates 2 different addresses, and there's a lot of cleanup that has to happen, and that's one of our goals, to get the address situation squared away. As far as enterprise network systems, we want to implement 2-factor authentication for all city critical applications. So in other words, if you're logging into email remotely, it'll be something, again, that you have, the computer you're logging in, something that you know. So you'll log in and it will send a message to your phone or text to you. And then you'll also have to put that in just like you do with your banking systems, et cetera. It'll be 2-factor. Also, to centralize all city facilities on a Vigilon access control to allow BSO to be able to see it and view it. Next slide. Now to the numbers on our operating budget. As you can see, our budget has also been reduced in each and every area. As far as personnel services, we've reduced our budget $67,796 in what's proposed for fiscal 21 as opposed to fiscal 20. That's a 5% change. What that equals up to, and you'll see underneath on the bottom, for personnel services, we want to remove one GIS specialist position, which we have. We want to remove one IT intern position, but we also want to change that because my first half hour every single day is looking over various different threats and seeing what happened and looking over various things that have to deal with security. And we get a great number of emails and texts and various things on security to be aware of. And so we need a dedicated resource to not just look at what's happening in security, but read each one of the prompts, also to look at our firewall, look at who's trying to access various different files. And I've talked to the manager and he agrees that we definitely need that particular person. And in order to make sure that we didn't increase the budget, we just changed 2 positions. We removed 2 and then we added that 1 position. The additional money is from consultants that we had. We no longer need that. I now have a pretty sharp and pretty steady team. And so we were able to reduce that by $67,796.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yes,
The GIS specialist and the intern, those are vacant positions currently?
that is correct. Thank you. That is correct. In the area of operating expenditures, one of the things that we do now is as we procure various different equipment, and we started that as I came in, is we try to get a total cost of ownership. So when I buy equipment, just like when we buy laptops, we buy switches, we buy servers, I try to make sure that we get maintenance for 3 years. And by doing that, we've been able to, like I said, it gives us a better total cost of ownership, but it actually reduced the amount that we pay for maintenance each year. So by doing that, we actually were able to reduce our expenditures. We also reduce our expenditures by professional services. We reduce the amount of professional services we have, but mainly in equipment. It's a different paradigm that we have. We kind of buy everything and we get 3-year warranties, and that's been able to reduce it. As you see, the change is 19% change in what we propose for the next year. As far as capital outlay, like we said, we've got to do a whole lot less than we've done. And can you please go back? Thank you. Than we've done before. And as it comes to that, it's a reduction of $125,000. The $20,000 that remains is in keeping with our 4-year replacement for switches, end of life switches. And so that $20,000 is to replace some of the switches that we have. Next slide. Future considerations beyond fiscal 21. Some of the things to think about as we just got through discussing. Actually, the ERP system, of course, has to be replaced. So that's first on my list. Next is new access control throughout the whole city. So throughout the city, there'll be an access control. Again, something that you have, you'll probably put a code in, and also your new ID badge. Paperless environment. And Stephanie also spoke to that. Using Laserfish, eDocs. She talked about a virtue type thing, another virtual type permit thing, electronic documents. But the key is to go paperless as much as possible and put things and make them electronic. Also a centralized city phone system for greater functionality. One of the things that we thought about was throughout COVID-19, if we had soft phones, we thought that that would be absolutely great, right? We have our computers and we have that, but if your phone's able to follow you also and you're able to get all of that from your laptop, we thought that'd be great. So that's something in the future that we look at or whatever for future considerations. And then an interactive voice response system, allowing people another means to make payments. Next slide. The contingency budget. So as far as the contingency budget, we had to try to cut and make about a $215,000 difference. So we started off with reducing the maintenance for which, like I said, now as we buy them, we do things a little bit better. So reducing that by $10,000 for some of the older systems that we still have maintenance for until we can get to the time that we replace them. That's one thing. And what's the difference? Of course, some maintenance, some devices will not have maintenance. The next thing, Zoom subscription, $12,400. If we got rid of that, obviously we wouldn't be able to have this particular type of meeting. So virtual conferencing will be a big issue. Travel and training, cutting that by $25,000. What does that lead to? Poorly trained staff on new technology. We've looked, and the city looks to technology to help to keep that new norm. And we've gotten a great deal of equipment over the last year. And so training's been extremely important for me and my staff, but obviously hard decisions have to be made. And so if that has to, if we have to do something, cutting that training budget for $25,000, staff will be, like I said, poorly, not trained as well, but that's one of the cuts. We also have a position for part-time people, so that part-time salary for somebody to come in as an intern, that's the $27,478. We get that towards contingency. It's great to have, but the next one is important. After trying to get to $215,000, I cut, you can see employee training, $15,000, and then the last one is Gartner, and Gartner wind up helping out a great deal when COVID-19 hit. Gartner is nationwide, not nationwide, but worldwide, and I was able to make phone calls, and they were actually able to help me navigate through many of the technological difficulties, and it's because they had experts who were over in Europe and in China, helping them through there. So when I called them, they were able to tell me already some of the best practices. And we had various different conversations, not just myself, but the management team, just to get knowledge on how to handle things. And so that was really great, but that's 50,000. But the one, like I said before, if in fact, when I wind up making all the cuts that I could possibly make, and got as trim as possible as far as contingency, the only thing left for me was staff. And if in fact it has to come down to a reduction on staff, my suggestion was to reduce staff for those that make over 50K. And I say that because obviously as things go, most of the people that are making less just can't deal with a pay cut as much as those of us who make a little bit more. So that was just my way of looking at trying to cut and reach that number. Next slide. This shows our boss desk system, and it shows pretty much the issues that we have. Incidents are issues that we have. We have requests like if you want new software or if you want a new mouse or something like that. But for the most part, these are incidents that we have. And so now we are able to better track the issues by different type of areas: hardware, software, GIS, mobile incidents, executive time, which is our time and attendance module, and then network incidents, and even general support. We also added public affairs and marketing to Boss Desk, and they were able to have 513 of their tickets, because now if you're putting in an issue or if you want to get a press release or anything like that, they ask you to put that request in the Boss Desk. So it's better able to track what's going on. All in all, our tickets is less than 2,000, about 1,800 or whatever, but we're able to track, and when we're able to track and we're able to see if the issue is a hardware issue, if it's a learning issue, and if there are particular type of issues, we provide additional training on that. Next slide. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Yes, I do. Is it okay, Mayor?
Yes, go right ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. I just want to ask you, Ron, with the proposed cuts, is there any category or any possibility that the city is left in any way vulnerable?
The cuts that I requested initially in the first slide, and we can go back to the slides if you can, those were already taking that into consideration to make sure the city's whole. So that's the slide up again, that one. So those already consider various things in the city, and those cuts will keep the city whole. The contingency, those are the hard decisions. We've gotten a great deal of equipment. We've added new software. I've had training with each and every one of you on Zoom. As new things come up with Zoom, as you know, people have Zoom bombed and everything. We have to stay aware. We have to train. We have to stay up to date on things. So cutting training for IT, especially when technology is kind of leading the way to that new norm, or not leading the way, but at least stabilizing that new norm, is definitely difficult. Also, the advisory services, I like to know what's happening in other places. I think that's important for us, right? So that we don't try to invent the wheel. And so when COVID hit and I was able to talk and find out about some of the things that were going on and how they secured certain things in China and in Europe, it definitely helped me out a lot. And I think we stayed ahead of the curve. I know many of my constituents in other municipalities were having lots of different issues. They couldn't even contact somebody from Zoom, and they couldn't do a whole lot of things. we hopped on it, and when we had the commission meeting and we did that first Zoom meeting, it pretty much went through without any hiccups. So we were able to stay ahead. So when it comes to technology, when it comes to those kind of things, I think we keep the city whole. So these cuts that you see here before you, if these go, I'm not going to say that the city would be at risk, but I'm definitely going to say having poorly trained staff or not having access to some of these things might not put us ahead of the curve. And I like to not just be equal, I like to be ahead. I don't want us to be behind ever. So that's my honest assessment.
What concerns me is that, just to the north of us, and it wasn't that long ago that it happened, that Rivera Beach was hacked. And when the hackers got in, they had an entire city at their mercy. And so it ended up costing them a lot more because that happened. I just don't want to see that happen here. We have to be cognizant of whatever we do not create vulnerability. That in fact that we're making cuts, but we have to also keep in mind, especially for this department, that the city must be safe, because if not, no matter where we're cutting anywhere else, we could end up paying a lot more for any of the mistakes that we would make. So I just wanted to know where we were with that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hudak?
Thank you, sir. Hi, Ron. How are you today?
I'm fine, Commissioner. How are you?
Good. How many personnel do you have in your department?
Currently 12.
12. Okay, 12.
Including myself.
It's, it is very difficult to find individuals and to retain your good individuals. So, the 10% cut, which is, I would really try to find other ways because, we're all hurting now. But when people start hiring again, those are going to be the first people that start looking. And I would hope that you can find it somewhere else than a 10% dock in salaries. So I hope you sharpen your pencil with regards to that.
And Commissioner, if I may, I want to just say that, that's Ron's attempt to do as I directed, which is, and at the end of the day, I told everybody to get around 10% of what they've already sacrificed, because as you see, we still have some ways to go. The 10%, it's not that everything that's being presented needs to be done.
Oh, I understand that. I do understand that.
Yeah, and frankly, what Ron's proposing probably legally couldn't be done anyway. So let's just put that into perspective. Because you have to do that based on either union within the bargaining unit or the non-represented. So I'm sure Amanda's having a little bit of heartburn right now. The idea there is just to show that that's the salary, the amount of salary impact that would need to occur in order to accomplish what I have directed these directors to do, which is show me what an additional 10% looks like. So in the case of Mr. McKenzie in IT, it's 10%, you could get, that's how much salary he would need to cut in order to meet that 10%.
I understand that.
Vice Mayor Parnas, unless Commissioner Hudak, do you have any more?
I'm good.
Okay, Vice Mayor Parnas.
Well, if that department has 12 people, and 1.5 people would be 1.2 people would be 10% cutting. Basically, we're talking about him losing one person. And if necessary, and I hope not, the money can't be found elsewhere. If the head of the department feels his department can run with 11 people instead of 12, I wouldn't argue with them. I don't know enough about what they do, each individual, to have a judgment on that. That's why we have the head of a department. I would leave it to his judgment. If we find out it's wrong, we can always hire somebody in the future. But if he's right, we can get along without that one person without jeopardizing security. It's something to explore. We're
Just as a clarity, the proposition wasn't to get rid of a person, but to reduce 10% in salaries for
Understood.
people of a certain amount.
Understood.
Okay.
Which you may lose somebody over that, but you may not. It's possible. You cut somebody's salary, they may say, hey, I got bills too. So we don't know. But I applaud your taking on biting the bullet. I know it's not easy. You run a tight ship there.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions before we move on? I don't believe so. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Miss Robin, for Human Resources.
Good evening, Mayor, City Commission. Can you hear me okay before I just dive right in?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You can move to the next slide. All right. So I'm going to jump right into our fiscal year 20 achievements. We were able to implement an entire workers' compensation procedure on paper. Unfortunately, the training was scheduled for March. So once we get through COVID-19, we hope to reschedule that training, which will help to eliminate some of the time that staff spends managing the day-to-day operation of workers' comp. We were able to recover almost $20,000 in our subrogation program. We have almost $9,000 still pending to receive. What that means is that, let's say that a car hits one of our monument signs, we go after their insurer to cover the cost of that replacement. And so far this year, we have been 100% successful in those recoveries. We have continued our online safety training program. This is at no cost to us. It is actually part of our relationship with our insurer, FMIT, as well as Gearing Group, our risk broker. They also assisted us with the on-site safety training program. We've hosted 4 sessions thus far. Unfortunately, those also have been paused due to COVID-19. And we have actually, since we've implemented both programs, seen a reduction in our workers' comp claims, which is good news. We were able to integrate Naviline and Bentech. Naviline is the payroll system. Bentech is our enrollment system for our benefits programs. And so now we don't have to manually input, especially at open enrollment time, the systems talk to each other. So it automatically uploads and automatically changes at the start of the plan year. Also happy to report that we've had a 25% increase in employees who earned a monthly wellness incentive. What that means is that employees have participated, their participation has increased in the program, which has allowed them to receive an incentive off of their health insurance cost per pay. We've also worked on improving our communication with the workforce. We've implemented wellness newsletters and city-specific EAP video that actually went out during COVID-19. As well as different payroll flyers for announcements in an attempt to reach all of our workforce, not just those that are online all day long. For some fun, we introduced some city spirit days. This includes where we had our workforce dress up for Halloween. You may recall we did Ugly Sweater Day. We just recently did City Mask Selfie Day, since we are all required to wear masks and everybody has kind of created their own. We call them kind of our wellness, mental wellness days. We were able to comply with the new FDOT CDL procedures, and that has to do with a new clearinghouse that the Department of Transportation has set new laws that require us to upload certain things related to our CDL drivers. So we have implemented that. And we also, through COVID-19, have implemented emergency paid sick leave and emergency paid family medical leave related to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Next slide, please. As far as our goals for fiscal year 21, we want to continue with creating an employee communication plan. So while we have improved our communication, we'd like to have a full-blown strategy so that throughout the year, we are consistently and effectively communicating to the workforce. That would include employee updates, different reminders, not just the boring benefit stuff, but some of the fun things too. We want to diversify our employee training opportunities and those delivery methods. We focus mostly on site because that seems to work for our workforce, but with COVID-19, we're looking at other delivery methods that may work as well. We finally finished the employee handbook. So the next phase is to develop a new risk management manual. It is rather dated, and our broker actually is working with staff on that as we speak. We want to continue to provide the city-sponsored wellness plan. We are lucky enough that we have dollars through Cigna, so that doesn't affect our general fund budget. But also while maintaining and adapting to social distancing. So by way of example, our workforce will see a challenge coming out here shortly that is self-reporting for healthy habits changing. We also partnered with Parks and Recreation and allowed our workforce to earn points to participate in the 50K that just ended on Sunday. Obviously, we want to continue to analyze and assess the city's employee benefit programs, especially the ones that cost the money, the insurances. We want to develop a citywide equal employment opportunity program. Right now, we cover Title VII very well. That would be the employee side. Title VI is the program service side of federal funding assistance that we have through active aging, but we would like to create a citywide program, not just something that's specific to one program. We would like to improve our employee onboarding and offboarding so that there is more fluidity in when employees come on and when they are leaving employment for any reason. And now that we have finished the employee handbook, we want to help the other departments, including ourselves, in creating those standard operating procedures that may not specifically be covered by the handbook. And then you heard Mr. McKenzie say that we want to convert through Laserfiche the personnel files to make them paperless so we don't have that paper existing anymore. Next slide, please. So as far as the human resources budget is concerned, you can see from personal services that we have about a 3.3% decrease. That's mostly due to insurance services decreases, which we'll talk about in a minute, as well as staff that we hired at a less than projected in the original budget that we presented to you last year, or possibly later in the year and not at the very start. You will see that we have a slight increase or a decrease in operating expenditures. However, there are some things that I will bring to your attention that we did increase within there. One of those is the other contractual services for getting our personnel files paperless. It's a pretty intensive project. We don't necessarily have staff to manage that to get it done. It's about a $5,000 cost. We did reduce our travel and training for HR and risk staff. So that's the elimination of pretty much all of our trainings. We plan to utilize free CEUs through our existing relationships with other organizations so that we keep our certifications. And then we did reduce employee training. The budget as seen here still includes our mandatory training obligations and some other, not necessarily planned, but other training dollars available as we determine what that strategy would be for next year. And then you would see a slight increase in our minor equipment, tools, and hardware for the scanner for the personnel file project. Overall, that's a total of a 3.3% decrease in the human resources budget. Next slide, please. And then we get into risk management. This is where it gets a little more fun. So personal services, you do see a 1.4% slight increase. That literally has to do with the timings of when merit increases were given this year, which gave that slight uptick. Stop loss, we were able to, our claims are trending, catastrophic claims are trending very well right now. And so we have the ability to increase what we'll call the deductible, so to speak, where right now we are capped at $175,000 per employee for claims. If their claims become more than $175,000, the stop loss insurance reimburses us for those claims over that amount. If we increase that amount to $200,000, we save a significant amount of dollars. And so that's where you will actually see that operating expenditures go down by about 5.3%. That's partially stop loss, Partially, our employee health claims are actually trending lower. Our catastrophic claims, as I said, are down, and that has allowed us to reduce insurance services citywide as well. So you'll probably hear that repetitively throughout the presentations. Retiree health claims. So as you see, the operating expenditures of retirees down 35.4%. That one makes me the happiest. That's because we had a decrease in enrollment. We had people that aged out that weren't being subsidized any longer per our policies. And because of increasing premium equivalents, that also brought the revenues in, but also had retirees decide to choose other options for plans. You do see a slight increase in the operating expenditures in COBRA. That is frankly due to attrition. So we do have more people that have left employment that have gone in through COBRA. And then because of COVID-19, we may have more people that remain on that for a longer period if they had left and didn't receive other employment. So that's where you will see those numbers go up. So overall, we were able to reduce the operating budget for risk by about 9.6%. Next slide, please. As we consider things beyond fiscal year 21, COVID-19 has made us realize that there's probably a new normal to our work environment. We're looking at, obviously not just now, but in the future for time-saving purposes, virtual job interviews. How the changes in technology that we're using now may become more normal, like we're doing meetings now. We may see more Zoom meetings with brokers rather than face-to-face and traveling. And big talk through government is that telecommuting's not really been a big thing, and they're finding that in some roles, people are more productive when they are telecommuting. So looking at different hybrid options for that. So that's beyond fiscal year 21, we'll be looking at that. You all probably have heard us talk about other post-employment benefits, OPEB. You really heard that during the CAFR. That's something that we will continue to look at as we continue to look at retiree health benefits, because that's the liability that we're now required to book. The Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, it's called PCORI. It's a fee that was put back this year. It's for self-insured programs, but don't worry, don't think that if you're fully insured, you're getting off the hook. They just build that into your premium. It's just something that we have to fund. So you'll see a line item funded that wasn't previously. And then if you haven't already heard in the news, the Supreme Court issued a ruling just this month that Title VII now prohibits discrimination against LGBTQ employees. And so we will have to make some updates to our policies, but I think that was probably good news for the Supreme Court and for the country. So next slide, please. Getting into contingency budget. So I have two different, obviously, contingency budgets because of the HR and risk separation. So this is specific to risk. I'll go through these fairly quickly. NeoGov is the software that we use for applicant tracking. If you remember in the past, we had Civics Plus, we had to print applications, no capability of really tracking anything. It made it very difficult to retain files for recruitment in a easy manual way, and this software allows for that. So it would create more workload for the current HR tech that handles the recruitment. Service awards is something we could eliminate. That's about $12,000. That's that program at the employee appreciation party that we give our employees from 5, 10, 15, so on, little gifts and things to say thank you for their service. We do think that would reduce employee morale if we eliminated that. Same thing with the employee appreciation party. It's under the holiday festivities line item. We did decrease that line already by moving the employee party per a survey we did with the workforce to Villages of Hillsborough Park. So that was what that budget is for. We could eliminate the party in its entirety. We could also eliminate the paperless files project. It wouldn't allow us to continue to move forward and not spend so much time on manual things, but that would be about $10,000. And then we could eliminate the entire citywide training budget, but that would also create possibly some compliance issues with some of our required trainings, either by law or collective bargaining agreement. So that's the HR contingency budget. That's about 10%. Next slide, please. Oh, you got me already. Risk management, bear with me. This is actually 2 slides. So you'll see on here where I have consulting services, which is the Gearing Group liability and Gearing Group benefits broker. They're 2 separate things, but I'll talk about them together. They provide services not only for assistance with RFPs, they handle some of our day-to-day benefits. Any one of our employees can call the benefit side for questions about their benefits during open enrollment. They do all the open enrollment meetings. They handle the Bentech labs. And as far as the Gearing Group liability side, they handle review of all of our COIs, handle all of the communications between our insurer, and frankly, deal with all of our compliance items and the actuary services that are provided. So those would still be a cost that we would have to assume. HealthWell Solutions is the software that we use for the wellness program. It's actually what I think has brought a lot of our gains because it puts everything into one system. It talks to multiple devices, not just Fitbit. So we do have concerns about employee morale. If we were to eliminate that, it also would put some extra burden on staff to manually manage some of that tracking. And then COBRA and Retiree Billing Administration, this used to be done in-house. We'd have to bring it back in-house. We would lose our efficiency, likely lose some of our timely payments and collection of those past due payments. I know in the past there were issues with missing of cutting off of benefits for failure to pay. They manage all of those notices and everything for COBRA and Retiree, including when you're hired or you terminate employment, they handle all that COBRA communication. And then Bentech is the software program that does all of the open enrollment, and it's what we're able to run all of the reports for any of the analyzing we're doing during this time of the year as far as budget is concerned. Also what makes it talk to Naviline so that we don't have to do all the paper entry. And then next slide, please. We have built into the risk budget its own separate contingency budget. This is for when we get hit with large liability claims that may not be covered in the regular line items. This gives us a little bit of flexibility if we have a major settlement to cover. So eliminating that would mean that we would not have any contingency there, and we'd probably be coming to you to pull from reserve if we had something. And the last one on there is eliminating stop loss for health in its entirety. That's the cost there is almost $1 million. Eliminating that means that if we do have claims that trend above 175,000 or 200,000 starting next year, we would be on the hook for the full cost. So if a claim hit 10 million, we'd be on the hook for the full 10 million, where right now we would receive 8 million back of that claim. And so that is the risk contingency. And with that, that's the end. I'm ready for questions.
Amanda, can you go back to the last slide, please?
Sure.
The stop loss on the health, is that something can be done just for 1 year only or and reinstated the following year?
It could. We'd have to look at the contract terms a little bit closer to see exactly what that would entail. And then I don't know what that impact would be if we ended up with large claims over the year. They may hit us with a higher premium than what they do right now, but it's something I can absolutely investigate.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Preston.
Yes. How many people are a part of human resources? How many people work under you?
So there's 7 of us total in human resources and risk management.
Okay. And you were saying there were some things that was previously done before. So is it my understanding that there is none of the contractual services that 7 people could do? I mean, there's nothing we can do?
We could bring some of it back in. It would result in a loss of service for a lot of the other operations we do. So for example, NeoGov is one of our contracts that we use that makes us more efficient. If we eliminate that, our time to fill positions would likely increase drastically. If we were to pull back on one of the brokers, we would lose some of the services that we receive in the free trainings, in their services. You'll see in coming up here in a little while, they do all of our premium equivalent work. So when we're looking at the insurance costs and looking at the employee contributions and all of that, they do that whole analysis for us. I don't have anybody on staff that could actually do that based on their skill sets. We just don't have it.
So a lot of the things that we depend on that comes out of human resources, if I'm understanding you correctly, is basically contractual services.
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say some of the expertise comes in other contractual services, but keep in mind with 7 staff, 2 of them are only risk. So I've got 1 person that handles liability, 1 person that handles benefits. It's not a 1-person job to do that all in-house, hence why we have other contractual services to assist with that. On the HR side, one of those staff, it was one that was hired to deal with the auditor's finding related to payroll. And so that's something that was never housed in human resources before and now is. And so that's a function that didn't previously exist. And then we have 1 HR technician that does all of the recruitment. And the only piece that he has is NeoGov to assist with processing of paperwork. And then we have myself and an assistant director that oversees, I mean, I could go on and on about everything that's on our list. And then I do have an HR assistant that handles the day-to-day work. We're very paper intensive. Our phones ring a lot. She handles all of that. So you would see a loss in service and likely issues in morale as well if we lost some of our contractual services.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Santucci, we're ready to move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. The next presentation will be given by Ms. Medina for Public Affairs and Marketing. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well tonight. We'll just go ahead and jump right in with the first slide, which starts the detail of our fiscal 20 achievements. First up, we actually have the Deerfield Beach dive page already being built. That was one of our goals from last year. All of the video for this particular dive page has been shot. And so the page is in process. Obviously, COVID-19 did bring this project to a stop. And so this is something that we do plan to complete in fiscal 21, but it is in process and the page is being built. We added a city resource page to the website this year, and that includes basically lists of local nonprofit information as well as resources offered by local houses of worship, things like tutoring and food pantries. We also we completed the DFB under the peer calendar. That was completed for 2020 to be used in 2020 using pictures from the actual underwater camera. We designed some new theme pole banners to be hung throughout the city later on this year. We designed the water tower out west, which is nearly completed. I'm sure all of you have seen that out there. It looks actually exactly like the design, so we're quite pleased with it. We also designed several different concepts for the city historic signs that we will begin to see in front of historic homes and properties in the coming years. We also launched a new communications platform called Constant Contact. This software allows us to archive and organize our distribution list for communication. We're also able to launch community outreach campaigns from this one particular home base. We're able to track communications metrics on this platform, find out exactly how many folks are opening up their communications, how many are not clicking through at all. We are currently in the process of importing all of our lists into this. We're also in the process of cleaning up our list, but in the coming weeks, you will see some new marketing on social media and on the city website, encouraging residents to sign up for new city communications. Next slide, please. We've also worked this year with sustainable management on some Siemens marketing. This will be ramping up a lot more this year. You'll see some more Siemens marketing going out this year through social media and video, especially due to a lot of the different projects that are scheduled for this year. We rebuilt the underwater camera network system. It's got all new internal wiring, and fiber optic wiring was installed on this thing. We've also made some minor modifications on the base. We've also installed a new wiper motor, which that took us a while to get actually, because it was an obsolete part that we actually found, and we actually found a company in Sweden who designed that part for us. Live streaming and virtual events have been a hit on social media this year, especially during this COVID event. We've seen some great success with projects like Morning Sunrise. Morning Sunrise, if you haven't seen that yet, it's a live stream of the sunrise. It comes with a positive quote in the morning. It's essentially a moment of mindfulness, and our residents have really been drawn to this. On any given morning, we get anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 hits on this most mornings. We also live streamed our Memorial Day event featuring our own homegrown musician, Marcus Howell from District 2. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. You might remember last year, one of our goals was to do more live streaming and to really engage in that platform a whole lot more. And COVID absolutely helped us to really thrive in that environment. But the Memorial Day event that was featured this year was something different that we've ever done. And it really, it went over really well with residents. It was a beautiful event. And most recently, we live streamed the graduation day drive-through event for the Deerfield Beach High School graduation, which we hosted out at Quiet Waters. We had about just over 187 students attend the drive-through graduation. And at one point in time, we had up to 160 family members and residents live streaming that event. And they were essentially calling out their loved ones and congratulating their loved ones that they actually saw on video on Facebook Live. We also added the city's tagline to our branding and to a new horizontal logo that we stretched from the original logo. And we also worked with the Economic Development Department to create the design for the surfboard signs of the Kirk Cottrell Beach Pavilion that you can see right there on the right of your screen. Next slide, please. Some of our digital metrics that I wanted to share with you all tonight. These are really important to what we do because it's just a means of communication. This year we've already seen, I should say, a 29% increase in our Facebook numbers, which means the number on the left is all the numbers for all of fiscal 19, the total number of followers that we had on Facebook. This year, in the first 7 months of the fiscal year, we've already climbed to 23,000, and we've seen that 29% increase, which is quite impressive. I do believe some of that is due to COVID-19. We've also seen a 64% increase in our Instagram numbers. Now, this number is particularly important because you might remember that I talked a lot about this particular demographic at last year's budget presentation. The followers for this particular social media platform are millennials and Gen Zers. And so to be able to reach this particular group is very good for us. It's a great way to engage them in government. But this is also our lifestyle platform. So moving toward the future, as we start to market certain items on there, merchandise and things like that, it can provide also a revenue stream for us. Instagram is the fastest growing social media platform with the most engaged user base. And it has absolutely evolved from a simple photo sharing app to a very powerful marketing tool that we hope to take advantage of here in the very near future. We've also seen a 21% increase in Twitter numbers. I have never included Twitter numbers in these presentations because it's not one of my favorite platforms and we haven't had a whole lot of success with it. However, I was very surprised by the jump that we saw this year. So I did decide to include it, but we did see a 21% increase in those numbers. And already this year on YouTube, we've matched fiscal 19's total views on YouTube. And this is without having had the underwater camera on for some of this time. Last year, total views were at 1.8 million. This year, first 7 months of the year, we've already hit that number. Our beach cameras have become incredibly popular with our public, with visitors especially, and residents. And the morning sunrise live stream that I just talked to you all about has a lot to do with that. Live streaming from Facebook has definitely been helping to drive residents and visitors to our YouTube page, and those numbers are steadily climbing. We are on target to surpass our press release distribution for fiscal 19 and have already surpassed our numbers, our fiscal 19 numbers in video and graphic production for the year. Next slide, please. I thought it would be important to include this particular slide. Most of you know, well, all of you understand what our central role at the city is. Aside of all of the great marketing things we do and all of the fun stuff that is happening, that seems to be happening all of the time in my department, crisis communication is by far the most important thing that we do. COVID-19 was an overnight event that we did not plan for, unlike a hurricane where we can pre-plan a graphics package and a lot of our communications templates, but this was something very different and foreign to all of us. And overnight, the work began very quickly on this. And just to give you an idea of what we were seeing between March 1st and March 13th and June 1st, we worked with the city manager and the city attorney to create messaging from 11 state executive orders, 17 county orders, and 7 city orders. That messaging went out in any one of 48 press releases between March 13th and June 1st. In that same time frame, Pam also introduced 74 different videos and produced more than 200 graphics on everything from how to wash your hands properly to COVID-19 Mythbusters. Total social media posts between March 13th and June 1st have already surpassed 681 across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And those numbers don't even include engagement, answering questions, comments, concerns, going back and forth with the public. Additional achievements out of COVID-19, within a 24-hour window when we were first hit with COVID-19, we created the COVID-19 webpage, and within days following that first day where the March 13th date actually, we actually created 16 sub-pages on everything from restaurants serving takeout to FAQs on coronavirus. We've also worked over the past few months with IT and the clerk's office to stream virtual city meetings from Zoom to YouTube, and Pam handles the after meeting edit on that. Next slide, please. Some of our goals for fiscal 21, obviously, is to complete the DFB dive page, as I mentioned a little earlier. The biggest team project that we will have this year by far is the redesign and audit of the city website. That will come at no cost. It's part of our contract. But this is going to be a very big and time-intensive project, not just redesign and the reproduction of videos and graphics, but we're also going to be auditing the pages and getting rid of just what doesn't work there anymore. We expect that this project is going to take about 6 to 12 months to complete. We're also working with parks to explore the potential for a city radio station. They will use, I believe they plan on using that for city events, things like a drive-through for our residents, drive-through movies for our residents. This is something that we would utilize specifically and only for crisis communications. If we have a hurricane and it takes out the towers and electricity, we have another means of communicating to our public. We're also hoping to stabilize the repairs and maintenance for the underwater camera this year, now that we've rebuilt a lot of it. And we're hoping also if we've got the funding for it, in the underwater camera budget to replace the underwater camera platform. One of the things that we've been dealing with a lot this year with the underwater camera is replacing a lot of those parts that originally came with that platform and that camera. The underwater environment is really volatile with erosion, and a lot of those parts are starting to go, and so we are having to replace a lot of that. Next slide, please. Our operating budget, as you see, it's never been a very big one. Most of what we spend money on in this department is really things like software platforms and pens and pencils and those types of things. But definitely things that we utilize, tools that we utilize to do our jobs. But we did manage to trim some money off of this. Fiscal 20 was at $504,000, just over that. Fiscal 21 recommendation is at $489,000. And some of the cuts that came into this were obviously merits and increases were frozen, so that factored in. But we've also completely eliminated travel and training, awards entries, city, county events expenses. So we eliminated all of that, and we were able to save about $14,000 and change for 2.9% savings. Next slide, please. Some future considerations beyond fiscal 21. At the end of 2019, the number of social media users worldwide hit about 3.5 billion.
Rebecca?
More social media users than ever. And with that increase and with that constant growth, we have seen, and we've seen this in Congress and with federal government, more pressure to regulate the digital world.
Rebecca?
Yes.
I'm so sorry to pause you. We are running very long in this meeting. If
Okay.
we kind of cut through some of this a little bit quicker,
Sure.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we are running very behind.
Okay, we can get right to the contingency budget then.
Okay.
The contingency budget, as I mentioned, a lot of what we spend our money on are just tools that we use to do our jobs with. The other two things that we could potentially look at are number one, the social media consultant. We were very fortunate to have that approved for our budget this year. We didn't get through the entire contract with COVID-19 and the budget shortfall that we were facing. We cut that contract right in half and essentially eliminated or stopped moving forward with that deal. And so, but it still remains as a line item in this upcoming budget that can be cut. The other option is to cut the underwater camera funding that we receive. If we do that, that would mean that we would have to remove the fish cam from our YouTube channel, and we would have to stream a taped version through the porthole camera. So we wouldn't be able to stream live through the porthole camera. So there are some things, there are a couple of things, there are two of our biggest line items, but those are the ones that I included in my contingency budget. Next slide, please. And that is all. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? No.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the city clerk to finish out this evening.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started right away.
I can't hear you, Samantha.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. So the first slide is our fiscal year 20 achievements. For records management, we currently disposed over 150 boxes, and the documents are tracked and cross-referenced to assure accuracy with the vendor. For supervisor of elections, I basically wanted to, make sure you guys are aware that we are providing your annual disclosure forms, your Form 1 statement of financial interest, and all of those forms that have to be posted to our website according to the county's Code of Ethics. Next, we have our public records. We have received over 2,000 requests to date, and out of those 2,000 requests, 98% of them are completed within 10 business days. Effective liaison between departments and general public. We currently provide services to the departments for, anything that they request that could be in Laserfish. So if they send the request, we try to make sure that the requests are completed within 24 hours. And as far as the public, since the receptionist position has been frozen and removed from our department, we serve as the switchboard again, which we previously did some years ago. As far as training and development, we are providing public records training to internal staff so that it reduces our exposure to liability. So everyone is on the same page. Everyone knows how to properly respond to a public records request. As for implementation and updates to Civic Clerk, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Revitalized agenda management software. We recently switched from Granicus to Civic Clerk, and we were able to take all of the videos from the previous vendor, Granicus, and we have moved them over to the current website with Civic Clerk. So now the public is able to view videos up until 2017 along with minutes and agenda backup. Next, we have the standardization and adaptation of virtual meetings. Since the pandemic hit, due to social distancing requirements, staff had to work quickly and adapt to a new way of conducting city business. With the assistance of information technology, the clerk staff developed a standard operating procedure to walk departments through the process of what to expect during a virtual commission meeting, as well as provide trainings for elected officials to make a smooth transition. Next slide. Our major goals: paperless environment and electronic records access. We're in the process right now of adding resolutions and ordinances dated from the 1960s to 1989 to Laserfish, which provides faster access by departments. While we do pride ourselves on a rapid response, allowing departmental access to historical records helps increase the department's ability to secure needed information. Additionally, with this help with responses to public record requests, whereas instead of manually searching for historical data, it can be secured in minutes. We also reduce labor costs for the requesters by doing this. Advisory boards, we will be creating a handbook as well as providing sunshine law training for advisory boards coming up in fiscal year 21. Hopefully, if social distancing has, slowed down or is not as prevalent as it is now. The next thing with our website, the remediation of the city's website. We are in the process of trying to make all documents and forms on the website ADA compliant. That will require staff to work with other departments in order to go through their web pages to see what information is superfluous. Now, we also want to revamp our municipal candidate process. Right now, everything is provided to the candidates via paper. The plan is to provide all the forms and the laws on a thumb drive and encourage the completion of any forms electronically, but also submit the form with a wet signature. Candidates will no longer have to search for forms and will have the capability of providing the forms electronically to their treasurer, if any. Employee training and development. In order to, keep our staff abreast of the current laws, we will continue to have public record trainings, which is facilitated by the city attorney. We will also provide a records management training as well. That training will help people identify what records, meet retention and how to respond to the records once they've met the retention. And we also want to make sure that the record specialist in the department receives ADA training as a refresher. This course will also be offered to others if it is necessary. Next slide. This is the operating budget. Oh, the next two slides I'll show you is just a simple breakdown of how the budget has changed from fiscal year 20 to 21. Next slide. So as you see in personal services, it is a 13.8% decrease, and that is effectively due to the elimination of the receptionist position. Although operating expenditures is lower than it was this fiscal year 20, there is an increase of $30,000 for document remediation. That $30,000 is to be split throughout all the departments. So when you receive your agenda backup and it's posted online, all of that information has to be ADA compliant. So each department would be responsible for making it ADA compliant or sending it out to a contractor who we have services with at a reduced lower price. Next slide. So with this one, this is the city election. The election costs for fiscal year 17 total $123,321. Now, as you can see, in fiscal year 17, we actually paid the Supervisor of Elections office $114,000. They have provided an estimate to me for a total of $102,000. Seeing as how I doubt that their figures are correct, I am estimating above that. I actually put it at a 5% increase because, well, to put it frankly, there are so many new people in the Supervisor of Elections division that there is no way that you can really rely on the figures that are being given to you. And some of the other cities that I've had the opportunity to speak with, they are facing upwards of $188,000 for this election. Next slide. So the future considerations for beyond fiscal year 20. Over the next 2 to 3 years, I would like to look into providing an online payment portal for public record requests in collaboration with financial services. I don't want to have, a lot of different vendors for these types of services. So the key would be securing the service at the same rate that financial services currently has with their online payment system for water bills. Campaign financing software. The financing software is a little bit expensive. It's about $9,000 to start, and it is $2,600 per year. But what it does is it reduces the time that we spend to make documents ADA compliant. So when you campaign, for those who are coming up for their term, when you campaign again and you have to create your forms, when you fill those forms out manually, staff has to take, I would say, double the time to remediate the form and place it on the website. If it is electronic, everything is typed out. It reduces the amount of time that we spend on remediation. And the campaign software does more than that. It would be a big help to the candidates as well, because it gives you the time frame that your report is due. It tells you if you are violating any laws. So it's not something that is just you're putting in information and that's it. It is actually a help to you. As far as the municipal election schedule, as I indicated, the costs are increasing and more municipalities are moving from the March odd year election to the November elections. In 2017, we had 7 cities that participated in the election, and this year only 5 cities will be participating. Something else we wanted to look at is city facility to house our records. Currently, we don't have the space to house our own records. And the reason that we feel that this is important is not only because it reduces our expenses, but it also allows staff to oversee the documents to make sure that nothing's being removed from the boxes, that nothing is being destroyed prematurely, which is why we cross-reference everything when it comes down to a destruction. Lastly, online notarizations. That is something that we have looked into in the past, but because the cost is really prohibitive, we haven't moved forward with that. Hopefully, if there's a vaccine for COVID, we won't have to worry about online notarization, but the cost is very pricey, and it is not dependent upon a group of people. It's dependent on each notary. So if you have 10 notaries, you'll be paying $1,000 a month just for online notarizations. And that concludes my presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. One more, contingency budget. These are the things that we felt that if we had to remove anything, from our budget in order to make sure that you guys, that we're able to balance the budget this year or next fiscal year, we would go without our training. The training that you see outlined here would be for the clerk and the assistant clerk to attend the Florida Association of City Clerk conferences. The next is the operating budget. The programming and software budget. Right now, we have $46,400. $30,000 would be to remediate documents. $10,560 is for the agenda packages, and then $5,850 is for the public records software. The impact of that is the city would have to remediate the documents in-house. We would also have to provide the public records and agenda packages manually. And lastly, overtime. If we went without the overtime, which is only $1,000, and that only covers, the staff, the non-exempt staff that attend advisory board meetings, it would be, we would issue comp time in lieu of that, but it could have an impact on morale. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Drosky, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I know it's getting late, but I'm having some difficulty on the budget slides, in particular slide 4, 5, and 6. I can't get the numbers to line up, so I'm going to need some help. I can see online, on page 6, the FY21 recommendation for the elections at 139,950, which matches on slide 4, but the rest of the numbers, I just don't see where they add up. I'm having difficulty. If you go back to start with 4, 5, and 6, I don't see where they match up.
Okay, so the entire budget.
That's not what I have.
Okay, and you're correct. That was because tonight when I went back over the budget, I saw the figures and they were not correct to me. So I went back and I double checked them and I revised them.
Okay, so what you have online is what I have different in.
That's
print, so.
Yes, yours will be different because like I said, when I went back and I saw the figures, I said, this doesn't look right. So I went back and I started double checking all of them. And these are the correct figures that you see here.
Okay, could you just send that out to us,
Sure.
please? So
Sure.
we just have the updated version.
Sure, we'll send it right now.
Okay, all right, that's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Hudak.
Commissioner, okay.
I got it. I had the same question.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much, Samantha.
You're welcome.
Mr. Santucci.
Mayor, that concludes the presentations for this evening. We're now at the public comment portion of the workshop.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who has written in, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to close it to the public then. Commission? Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
With a motion from Commissioner Hudak, second from Vice Mayor Parnas. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.